welcome to everybody. I'm Denise Natoli-Brooks. I'm the Southeast Region Extension Educator in Agriculture and Natural Resources for Central State University. So the region set up for our state, the Southeast region that I cover geographically, is essentially Licking County outside of Columbus and Franklin County, east to the Ohio River and south to the Ohio River, and a lot of the Appalachian counties in between those two areas. So I believe we've got at least a person or two on the call already that is in that region. So if we haven't met in person before, we should. It'd be great to connect with you. And tonight, what we're going to connect on is wholesale marketing. So if you've followed the topics that we've had for the past few weeks, we covered marketing, a small farm niche. Michelle Wallace, who's on the call, covered that for us. And then we covered last week with Mark Amonte, direct sales, so focusing more on farmers markets, and CSA's, community-supported agriculture models, where you're selling directly to the consumer, the person that's consuming the product you produce. And then this week, building on that, we're going to do wholesale, where you're not selling directly to the end user, but you're still selling your farm products. So building on this, the focus tonight is wholesale, but maybe not wholesale in the traditional way of thinking about it. I am comfortable with folks posting questions in the chat. I've got folks that are monitoring the chat. If you have a question, also, I have no problem with questions during the presentation, and then we'll have time at the end as well for questions. So I am going to share my screen so you can see the presentation. Let me know when it pops up. And you should see the cover slide that says wholesale marketing. Topics that I want to cover tonight in the wholesale is to really define what wholesale marketing is and what wholesale is on a small scale farm operation or for a small scale farm operation, and then why it may be worth considering wholesale on that small scale farm operation. And then if you choose to consider wholesale, how do you actually develop those relationships with wholesalers? Because it's a different type of relationship you're developing with someone that's buying your produce but then reselling it versus the direct market where you're developing a relationship with that person who you know is ultimately going to eat, to consume the products you're producing, use them in their home, that sort of thing. When we talk about wholesale distribution, we're really talking about a company, big or small, they come in all different sizes, but a company that is the marketer for you. Because once you sell your product to the company, the wholesaler, they're in charge of then selling your product after that to the end user. And that could be along many different paths. That could go right to the end user, the consumer. That could go to a few different retail stops along the way. But what the wholesale distribution allows is that once you market your product to the wholesaler, they are then in charge of marketing your product to the end user. And what that does or offers for the small scale farmer is it sometimes takes the pressure off of the small scale farmer having to be the farmer producing everything and doing the marketing for all of the work and spending the time at the farmer's market, because that wholesaler can also move your produce around to where it ultimately needs to go. They can be really effective because they're up to date on market trends. They can make the connections with people, entities that want what you are able to offer. They have a lot of industry knowledge. The other thing, and something that I think is really important to consider with the wholesalers, is that they may have resources that a small scale farmer doesn't have and isn't comfortable investing in. Think about the packaging. that needs to be done with the produce. Think about cool storage that you may need, or that you may need to be able to expand your operation. The wholesaler has that stuff. They have the refrigerated trucks to transport produce, which that's a much different way to transport produce or meat or anything like that than trying to transport it in the back of the pickup truck. And then also they have options depending on the type of wholesaler. They could purchase directly from you, so like you make the sale to them, and then whatever happens to your product after that is out of your hands. There's also models where a wholesaler will buy, but it's on consignment. And we'll talk about those models a little bit more. But when we're thinking about what does the wholesale model that distributor offer to a small scale farmer, I think that the infrastructure is really something to consider, the storage and the transportation piece.
Denise?
Yes.
This, honestly, I'm loving this because I'm seeing that this is basically what we are doing with the co-op. And that's what our marketer and our sales takes care of that wholesale in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I love hearing that. That was essentially a testimonial to why a small scale producer might consider wholesale. So yes, thank you. Right, because a lot of you're doing the small scale farm thing. Maybe you're a new and beginning farmer. You really want to focus on farming, doing that side of things, and that those distributors can help you with the other stuff. And that's really kind of what I want to be able to highlight this evening. And why I want to highlight it is because for the small scale and even medium scale farm, sometimes wholesale, if there's a stigma, it sounds really scary. It's only for the big guys. It's not for me. I'm too small. And I want to challenge that idea because there's so many types of wholesale. And traditional wholesale may be that piece that's maybe for a bigger operation. But there's a whole list there on the screen of types of wholesale. We're going to touch on all of them. We may talk about some more than others. And this is not an exhaustive list either. So when we talk about wholesale, it's not just one type of wholesale. There's many types of wholesale. Really look at the ones in bold. Those are the ones that I believe apply to the small scale operation. But before we talk about the ones that apply to small scale, let's make sure we identify what the traditional wholesale model may be. There are lots of wholesale distributors available to us in Ohio. I did a quick search through the careers in grocery, which is essentially a clearinghouse for all sorts of different careers in the grocery store and distribution industry. I did a quick search, and right now they list 52 wholesale produce companies in Ohio. Different sizes, different types, different models. But like just for produce in Ohio, right now they list 52 different companies that are wholesaling and distributing produce. I thought that was actually kind of interesting because you may
not enough.
Yeah. And you may wonder, what are they selling and to who are they selling and where are they sourcing this food from? How many of them are sourcing food locally? How many are sourcing food from small or medium size or only large farms? That number is like everything on this one site. And this would include distributors that are sourcing food from all over the country and all over the world. So it would take some time for anybody who's interested to look at that site, which is called careersingrocery.com, to dig in and see more about those companies. But I would guess that a very small part of that list would include distributors that are focused on the small scale and local food, because that in and of itself is a little bit of a niche in the wholesale world. And it doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just, that is more of that traditional wholesale model. I would say the wholesale model that's more like the traditional, but fits the the small scale farm a bit better for any type of product that you want. I would say we want to start looking at food hubs, co-ops too, but it's like a mini wholesale operation, if you will. It's not designed to pull from farmers and producers from a huge area. They may be specific to a state, a region within a state. They could be, a Midwest food hub. They could be itty bitty, like quite small, a smaller group of even farmers that together are trying to really sell a product locally, multiple products locally, but to create a hub, a place to pull in a lot of the smaller quantities of really great, nutritious, healthy, fresh, local foods. But food hubs aggregate. So, a little bit of parsley grown here and a little bit of parsley grown there could be pulled together to be a larger quantity of parsley to sell to a restaurant that is using it.
That's how we do it.
And it makes sense, right? It works. Anybody who has a small scale area, you have a small area. There's only so much you can grow, and we can extend the season, and we can do plantings successionally. We can do all sorts of things, but we're still a smaller space and possibly likely less people as well to do all that work. But if I can grow some of this and you can and someone else can, it really does increase your share of the market. There's different ways that food hubs operate, and they even change and mature over time as to what they are offering, what they are hoping to accomplish. But one thing that food hubs do offer is that local focus and small scale focus. There are for-profit food hubs. There are not-for-profit food hubs out there. Some offer a warehouse. Some offer the distribution center itself. Some offer the transportation services. Some even offer the space for you to package your food or do even some value added as well. There's lots of options. And they often can pair themselves with specific contracts. So, for example, we have the Oberlin Food Hub in Northeast Ohio. They definitely have a local, a regional, small scale focus, but they have a piece that's very much a farm to school focus. So they are aggregating, pulling together these foods that schools, kindergarten through 12th schools, are interested in using in their lunch programs and breakfast programs and all that. There is in Southeast Ohio, there is the Chester Hill Produce Auction where different growers, small scale growers can bring their products and they are auctioned. It's a produce auction, but there's other partners in the area, Rural Action and the Appalachian Centers for Economic Networks, or ACENET, that are working together to be able to acquire the food at the auction, the produce at the auction, process it, and then be able to sell it out of season. So for example, that the food hub effort has recently taken peppers that were sold at the auction months ago, because we don't have fresh peppers right now, and they were able to purchase them at the auction, slice and freeze them, and recently sell them to a local school district so that there was fresh food at that school for students during the year when you wouldn't have that local food option. So many models exist out there, and it's always interesting to learn about them and learn how they're working, what they're offering the community. I mentioned the two examples. I mentioned Oberlin Food Hub and the Chester Hill Produce Auction, Rural Action, ACENET partnership. they both happen to sell to farm to school. And that is one of the networks or pathways for wholesale. And I think it's
we sell to Oberlin.
excellent. Great. Great. Now, is that the co-op that you're part of?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Wonderful.
we do it as a co-op because it's lower risk too. Like if you have an issue and you can't provide, one of the other farmers, like you said, could have it. So it's a lower risk as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's a great point that you do in that partnership and that co-op and aggregating in general. It does take off some of that risk, but it also, that partnership, you're in it together. There's something nice about that as well. I love personally, I love the farm to school possibilities. I think they're really out there in our state and an area that hasn't really been captured yet. Food hubs are helping get our schools local foods if the schools are interested in procuring those foods. When you look at the ways that schools serve food, there are so many different programs. It's way more than just lunch in the cafeteria. All of the programs listed on this slide are official food service programs. So we've got the school lunch program, which, schools have served lunch for a very long time. The breakfast program, free breakfast for students, in a lot of cases, every day. But then also some of the programs that maybe aren't talked about or heard as much, there's a program specifically designed to get more fresh fruit and vegetables into the schools and for the students to eat. This one I think is interesting to look at for small scale produce in our state. And then also there's special programs for specific audiences, the child and adult care food program, as well as an at-risk after-school meals program. The after-school meals you sometimes hear referred to as backpack programs because often the school is packing food in a backpack, a sack or something for the student to take home, maybe over a long weekend because they're food insecure, they don't have food at home. So those are options. And a lot of these programs continue in the summer. So just because school's out doesn't mean that the school isn't supplying food for the students. And that's one of the arguments I've heard for farm to school, against farm to school, is that most of what we grow in the summer. School isn't in session. School's not in session, but there's still food being served to students. So it's worth digging in and finding out what programs the schools are participating in, where they're sourcing their food, if they have an interest in local. And there's actually a number of different resources to kind of help guide you. A really interesting one is the census that's done, a farm to school census. This is a real thing, a national census that's done. Schools participate by choice. They don't have to participate, but it's a survey and it asks some really specific questions about serving local foods and your interest in serving local foods and what they are. And you can search by specific school district. You can look at the school districts close to where your operation is and get a lot of very interesting information. And then you can reach out to the food service coordinator, because that's the person who prepares the food, coordinates the preparation of food and the ordering of food and things like that, to see their interest. You might think, I don't have anything to offer a school. I don't produce anything that would work for this or enough of something, but schools even are providing healthy snacks. Snacks usually mean smaller quantities. So maybe a snack is a taste test of fresh cucumbers. Maybe that's something that fits. Or looking at a school district that's small, a single school, a private school, How do they prepare their food is an important question. Some schools do prepare food. They have the facilities to prepare food, and some schools actually don't. They need everything already prepared, and different models in between of what's going on. Some districts have a central kitchen that prepares the food and then brings it to the different individual schools. So there's lots of possibility and lots of questions to ask for specific schools, but farm to school has a lot of options. And the way into a school for wholesale might actually not be directly through the programs listed on the slide. They may actually be through some other fun things, like offering a farm visit for a grade level, or finding out when the schools do career days. And career days aren't just for like high school age, there's career days in the elementary level too. But farmer, what is the career of a farmer? Getting those connections, taste tests of foods that maybe a child hasn't eaten before, and maybe even a taste test as part of a wellness program, not as a food in the cafeteria, but just as a fun taste test or a survey. Get the kids' feedback on food. And then there's different connections to what each grade level learns that could be connected to the food or the garden that they're growing at their school. Those would be connections with a teacher specifically that might help you connect with the school as a first step to then thinking about, would they like to actually purchase a quantity at a wholesale level for meals at the school. I think the special celebrations have a lot of possibility too, because we have a few special celebrations already set up in Ohio that you can really capitalize on. If there's any apple growers on the webinar, you may have heard about the Great Apple Crunch. It is a simple but really fun event every October. The idea is that we're celebrating apples grown in Ohio, and this is actually not just in Ohio, it is a Great Lakes region, but the Ohio Apple Crunch on Apple Crunch Day, all over the state, thousands of children and teachers, schools were registered, and they were crunch into an Ohio apple at noon on Apple Crunch Day, and there were lessons and learning about apples throughout the year, or the month, the Apple Crunch month of Ohio. But that was a way that a lot of local producers were able to get their apples into schools and expose kids to what they were growing. But why not come up with some special events about whatever produce or product you want to promote? We've got the Ag Week coming up in March. Pick whatever you want to for Ag Week. How could you incorporate it into school? And then make a big deal about it. Part of marketing for wholesale isn't just marketing to the school, in this case, that might buy your produce. It's also marketing within the community, because selling to a school is a community effort as well. You're bettering the community by bringing them nutritious food and promoting local food, a local business, a local farm. So share those stories in the local media. I think that the farm to school, like I said, has a lot of possibility. When I talk farm to school, I was focusing on more like that kindergarten to 12th grade, but don't discount an early childhood center as well. They're offering food to their students. So anywhere where you've got those students, those children, may be an opportunity for wholesale to market to that specific place. When we talk about farm to institution, it's actually similar to the farm to school. It really is. We're just talking about what's usually an adult audience. So the colleges, universities, hospitals, sometimes large businesses have their own cafeteria on site, or large office buildings have their own cafeteria on site. And what they offer varies from place to place. So when you're doing research about where could I have a wholesale contract that fits my operation, you might have to, take the time to do the research to find out what is available. So if you were to say, well, I know I've got a college or university close enough to me, they must have a cafeteria because they have students. But what else do they have on their campus? Some schools, colleges, universities have an actual restaurant on campus as well. They have a catering service as a department on their campus. So it may be more than just like that school cafeteria or dining hall for the college students. That could be an opportunity for the farm to school. I've got a salad bar picture here because a salad bar could be a great opportunity for fresh produce to get onto a menu. And it doesn't mean that you have to have your fresh produce or your meat or your eggs or whatever the product might be on the menu all the time. It could be for a certain amount of time and a certain amount of product that fits the needs of the institution or school you're selling to, but also fits what you can produce. For a larger institution, like say a college, that would have a very large meal order or food order to serve a whole student body, we're not necessarily going to replace all of their needs through lots of small scale farmers contracts selling wholesale. It will be a part of what they purchase, just like as a small scale farm business, wholesale contracts would be a part of your business, but you would likely diversify your sales and have different sales markets. So we are looking at a piece of the pie, so to say, for some of these places, like a farm to institution contract, not providing the tomatoes or cucumbers or carrots like the salad bar all year round, but maybe just for a part, maybe with a special way to highlight what you offer. So this week or this month, we're featuring carrots from Baker's Farm, located in a nearby town. What a great way to have your name out there. I would say one of the highlights of farm to school and farm to institution is you may have the ability to keep your brand identity where those folks that are eating your food know where the food comes from still. Whereas some larger wholesale accounts, you may lose that brand identity. You might sell your food and what happened, or your product and what happens to it later, you don't know, and whoever is consuming it, they don't know that it came from your farm. Consider that with wholesale. If brand identity is really important to you, wholesale may not fit, or you may need to ask those questions very carefully when setting up contracts and building relationships. Also, as we get into some of these bigger wholesale contracts, we do want to look at a bit more with your record keeping, traceability, and then food safety, things like good agriculture practices, FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. What do these larger buyers require of you? And is that something that you can do at your scale? Another small scale farm possibility that I think is worth considering in wholesale and may end up being easier than you think when we focus on local foods and the local food movement could actually be farm to restaurant, especially the non-chain restaurants, or smaller local chain restaurants. What restaurants are in the community? What does their menu say? What on their menu includes an ingredient that you could offer? Doing a search online, I found a regional chain, and on their website, very clearly, I could tell that they wanted to let their customers know that they supported local farms and local food, and they went as far as to say who their partners were. They called their farms that they buy from their partners, listing them right on their website, and having live links to go right to those farms. You talk about that restaurant wanting to let their customers know where that food came from and connecting with the places that they are procuring their food. I haven't been to this restaurant myself. I could find this online. There's a lot of at-home research you can do before you head out to that restaurant, and see what it's like for yourself. But if someone's already promoting local food in their business, their restaurant, they might be a good contact to make. And wouldn't it be fun to just try out the restaurant that you've not been to before? Or maybe it's a restaurant you do go to regularly. Ask to talk to the chef, to meet with the chef. You don't know what they're interested in buying until you ask. So it could be really fun to try out things on their menu that you like. It's just as fun to offer the chef free samples of what you can provide to them. Chefs like food. They're chefs. They want to try new stuff too. So let them try what you got. Let them play around with it. Give them the opportunity to try out your produce, fall in love with it, and then have a real discussion about what they want, how much they want, when they want it. Like how regularly do they want the product that you can provide, and especially the quantity. What is nice about the small independent, maybe 1 or 2 location places, is that the quantity they need is small. They may be able to work with you because it's such a small quantity. And there's a great chance that they will be happy to promote where that food came from and promote your farm as well. The flip side of this is if stuff goes really, really well, a restaurant may come back and want more, and you may not be able to supply that. So be very clear up front of what your limits are, because we all have limits of what we can produce, but what are those limits? And negotiate. When will you let them know what your supply is? How many weeks out? How often can you replenish that supply? Deliver the goods, but don't overcommit. That's the message there. We mentioned co-ops already, and I had them separated from food hubs, but there are a lot of similarities. I won't spend too much time on this because we've mentioned them before, but the cooperative, the co-op, the people that are participating, they are members of the co-op. So we have lots of different cooperatives in Ohio, different types of cooperatives, but a co-op for aggregating farm produce specifically, or just a general farmers co-op to sell products. There could be different types of co-ops there, but that co-op's benefit is that they are providing that marketing, that selling location, and often the transportation as well. But the individuals that are providing the product can still be that recognized farmer, farm brand, or farm name, that product name. Co-ops often work on commissions as well. And as we get into some of these specialties, these little wholesale niche areas, if you will, we have the wholesaler that is doing the marketing or transportation or whatever service for us. So it makes sense that there may be commissions, there may be a cut that is taken, and that the overall prices that you get will be less than if you're selling directly to a customer at a farmer's market, for example. We'll talk about price a little bit more later. But remember, there's a service.
Yeah, I can share on that percentage and where it goes later.
Excellent. Now, does Oberlin work on a commission? Oberlin Food Hub work on a commission?
No, but our co-op collects a commission, and that covers a lot of the things that you've discussed.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that quick idea or thought, you're like, a wholesale, I'll get such a low price. Your price is lower, but somebody else is doing the services that you no longer have to do in the same way. So it's it is a trade-off, but it's something to consider. If you sell to a specialty store, you will likely also have some sort of commission or consignment for that product. And these exist in Ohio. There's many different types, but they do offer collections of fresh produce. So one of the specialty stores, and actually where I got that 20% for fresh produce number, is a place in Lancaster in Fairfield County, Keller Market House. Lots of different products. There's also the public market in Wheeling that purchases from the region. So that would be, the Eastern Ohio region included in Wheeling, but they offer a grocery store / year-round farmers market, as well as a restaurant. Then there's other smaller spaces like a farm in the Zanesville area, Rip Burgers. They're known for their meats, but they have a market away from the farm. And in that market, they highlight a lot of local products. Some are value added and some are fresh. But that would be a store with a deli inside, little deli, little store. So lots of models that are out there. Many are nonprofits because they're trying to add value to that community, the local community, and build that local business or businesses. So they often are focused on keeping the funds in the local community, building up our small scale farms as well. Regardless of which of these options you choose, there are important communication strategies to keep in mind to set yourself up for success and set up the wholesaler for success as well, because you're building a relationship. I want to thank Paige Allast, who's on the call and who is our community and economic development educator in Southeast Ohio, for working with me on this presentation and definitely in thinking through and talking about communication strategies for wholesale. Every buyer has a different need, and the buyer knows their customer's needs. You need to find out what that is to know if what you offer will fit. That's a very important step in the communication. And as the seller of a great product that you believe in, you take the initiative, right? You are the one that's going to communicate with those wholesalers, reach out, let them know what you offer, learn about them, and find out what fits. And not everything will fit. That's important too. You also want to keep your marketing pretty simple, pretty clear. Know before you go into this what your pricing should be. Like, what does it cost you to produce this stuff? What's the pricing that you can accept? And if the wholesaler on the other end of this conversation offers a price that's lower than what you can accept, you walk away because it just doesn't fit. It's not wrong, it just doesn't fit. A lot of the small scale farm story is just as important as the product itself. So make sure there's a story. And the nicer that you present your product, the cleaner, more professional you present the product and yourself and your farm and your story, the more it's going to stand out, the more meaningful it will be. Have that presence set up and be ready to negotiate. Wholesalers are good negotiators. So if you're not comfortable negotiating, perhaps find someone that is to go with you for these conversations or practice before you go, but you will be negotiating prices here. And you may be surprised of what's offered to you. Some of these wholesale options I mentioned may give you a better price than you think you would get, and some may give you a lower and everything in between, but you won't know until you ask. So let's talk about pricing, because this is important, and this is something that may have turned people off to considering wholesale in the past. What is wholesale pricing? It just means that it's not the final price, because it's going to get marked up when it's sold in the next step in the process. So final retail markup has not been added. What is the markup? You don't actually know. It could be 10%. It could be 40%. It could be who knows. But you're selling at the wholesale price. You still have to cover your costs and make a profit as well. Keep in mind, the wholesaler, their purpose is to resell the stuff you produce. They're buying it from you to resell it. They're not the end user. They're not necessarily out there to be your the agent for you. They need to make a profit at the end of this as well. Doesn't mean you're not going to develop a relationship of respect to support each other. How do you know what wholesale pricing is or should be as you prepare for these conversations? There's a few different resources that I want to point you to. The USDA, so U.S. Department of Agriculture Ag Marketing Service, AMS, they come out with a report regularly on what wholesale prices are throughout the country, but they break it down to region. The big red circle that I drew on the graph is where the Midwest prices show up. So this isn't Ohio specific, but it's Midwest specific, and report by report, it'll tell you what's selling and for how much wholesale, traditional wholesale. So not this the farm to school model or a specialty store, but traditional wholesale, big grocery stores, that sort of thing. It also will highlight local products and the price of local products and organic products. It's actually pretty interesting to take a look at. I'll provide the link at the end of where to find that. And then you get a idea of how much that wholesale price is. The next step for you is to look at if you're trying to sell something like lettuce, tomatoes, and okra wholesale, and you know how much you can plant in the space you have, figure out your total sales. So in this example, okra is the bottom line, and the wholesale price that was found using the resources that I shared was $1 a pound, and based on how much I think I can produce, and this is really easy math on this one, but if I can produce 200 pounds of okra and it's selling at wholesale for $1 a pound, my total sales would be $200. Get an idea of what you would have wholesale. If you've been attending our webinars, you might recognize this chart because it is the same chart that was used in crop planning, and the prices in it were actually for direct sale prices, and I just modified it. The total sales with wholesale, total sales, the dollars you get on a wholesale price is definitely less. If we want to compare, here's another chart that I'll highlight from our crop planning presentation. The blue column is direct sale prices. The orange column is wholesale prices. Some of the difference in prices are 50% less for wholesale. Or we could be positive and say it's 50% more for direct sales. But these are things to look at, and it highlights why the wholesale may be a good option as a part of your diversified plan, your diversified sales plan. I do want to give a thanks to Dana Hilfinger for developing these slides that I modified. She presented our crop planning presentation earlier in our webinar series. So we talked a little bit about pricing and being ready for prices with our communication strategies. The last piece on communication strategies that I wanted to highlight is you need to just agree on a process, right? This is a contract. This isn't just a handshake. This is a contract. You have very specific details on what you're providing, when you're providing it, how much, in what condition, what the price is going to be. You're going to check in regularly. You're going to understand what the needs are and when and how you can change the volume you produce. If that's desired, you're going to communicate that to the wholesale partner. You're going to know what they want from you in terms of how they need your products labeled and delivered, packaged. and have those records. That packing slip is for them. It's for you too. You need a copy of that to know what you delivered to them. Lots of steps in there, but it becomes a practice. It becomes a habit, and it'll help in the long run. So where does this all fit? You view all these communication strategies, and you're trying to set up your wholesale markets, different wholesale contracts. You still have to manage the farm, right? Which that's a big process in and of itself. So where does this all fit in crop planning, which is obviously super important and what a lot of us are doing this time of year? You want to think about this wholesale marketing before you do your crop plan, because you kind of have to work backwards. You have to say, I want to plant this because I have these contracts, I have these places I want to sell. I think I can sell this much. So you're going to fit in wholesale marketing at the literally at the beginning of your crop planning. Instead of thinking of what I want to sell when, you're going to identify your wholesale markets and your direct-to-consumer markets first. After that is when you start thinking about who you are selling to and what's available, develop those schedules. And as I click through the steps on this one aren't necessarily as important, but you'll notice that step 1 was identify your markets. Step 6 is create that projection for your yield and what you require. Start at the end. Start by identifying your markets. Who's going to buy your stuff? All right, so the quick comparison of what we're looking at to remind you, because we talked about direct marketing previously, quick comparison of what we're talking about. A direct sales venue would be a farmer's market or a farm stand, community supported agriculture. They're a bit more flexible because you have what you have at your market stand. You do need a lot of different things to keep your customers interested, but it's not based on the same type of firm contract. Even a CSA subscription, you don't tell your customers exactly what you're offering every week because you don't necessarily know what you're going to have. You have kind of an idea. But those wholesale markets, restaurants, institutions, schools, that sort of thing, it's much more firm. They might just want a couple items, but they want a specific amount and sometimes a larger quantity. Either way, you're building relationships and managing all of it at the same time. So the big question is, should you go wholesale? Ask a few questions. There's actually a lot of questions. This is just a sampling, but some that I think are really important. If you want to spend more time on the farm, like you're tired of spending all your time at a farmer's market, it takes a lot of time to do farmer's markets, you might consider wholesale. If you want to maintain your brand identity, like it's really important to you that customers know who you are and how you grow your food, your values, wholesale may not be as good a fit for you. If you have some concerns about making an investment in infrastructure and in better transportation and a better pack house, but wholesale could provide that for you without you having to invest in it, maybe wholesale is a possibility you should consider. And then just, always keep in mind, you farm because you want to farm. So what do you like growing and what do you grow well? If there's a wholesaler interested in what you like growing and what you grow well, then maybe there's an opportunity for you in wholesale. And then as you do your research, is there an opportunity? Do you find a lead that you're like, I think this is a good lead, I'm gonna try it out? You could have one wholesale contract. You could have multiple wholesale contracts. You could do a few markets. Any model works. Build it up slowly. Don't get in over your head with too much to handle. Check out additional resources. I am not the only person that might tell you to consider wholesale, but there's interesting resources out there, some of them that I mentioned already during the presentation, and then some that I have on this slide, and I have links that I'll post for them. I want to highlight two very cool things. One, the graphics are the things I'm going to highlight. There is actually a Farm to Institution Midwest Summit coming up later in February, the 28th of February to March 2nd, that registration's open for. And then also bringing the farm to school. That graphic, that is actually a training.
Questions. Can you get a flu shot and a COVID vaccine at the same time? Yes, you can get them. All right. And if someone has COVID, but they're at home, they're handling it well, no need to go to.
Okay, bringing the farm to school logo there. That is a producer training. So it is a training for farmers who are very interested in how to sell farm to school, much more in depth than this presentation. That is something, if you are interested in, please reach out to me so we can gauge how many people are interested and when we might be able to offer that training. But it is something that is available. I'm available at any time to you for questions and not just to talk about wholesale marketing, but any ag and natural resource topic that you want to talk about. And this series continues. The February series starts next week, but Logan Walter will be presenting on planting schedules for vegetable crops. The registration is open for next week and the February webinars as a whole. So we're going to continue our webinar series, and we would love to hear from you as to what topics you're interested in. I would love to entertain questions, and while I do that, I'm also going to post links in the chat for you that I mentioned I had available. Any questions?
I'd just like to say thank you, Denise. This was like a deja vu of our last 3 years, almost down to the T. Everything you've mentioned, we've gone through, and this will be our actual first full year with every farmer online with us. And we're looking forward to a really good year to see how all the work pans out.
Very exciting, and I wish you the best of luck, and I appreciate the comments and feedback that you gave throughout. It's always good to hear how this really worked and really works for folks too.
Well, we've had a lot of help from extensions, OSU, and Michelle has been involved, and Dana actually helped to begin it at the very beginning. Dana Helpinger. I hope I pronounced it right.
Yeah.
But it's really been an experience, and everything is important that you've mentioned. I do have to. You won't be able to escape any of it, really, if you want to. I mean, you really have to consider it all, and we are very diversified. That's how we touched on every base you talked about. With this farm to school and everything, we're working on all that as well. And we've got our FSMA, the gap. Now, getting that actually becomes a value because you'll get a better price for your product, them being assured of the quality of your product. And you go through, they come by audits. Thank you. I couldn't. They give you audits, and you do the paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork, and you want, but still, that's for your benefit as well. Don't let that scare you away. Just keep up with it, and it won't get away from you. The other thing was you mentioned the value added products. That is a good way to keep your brand name as well, and we do that by our second or non-marketable products. We did like tomato sauces and that, and we found a cannery. They canned them, and we were able to put our label on it as well as theirs. And that's another way to reach out. But I don't want to talk too much. It just excites me that things are going in that direction accordingly.
Excellent comments. I think you just hit on at least like 5 topics we could cover in future webinars. I did just post in the chat links to the resources that I mentioned. Feel free to copy them. And if you need those again, feel free to reach out to me as well. I will drop my chat in the, or chat, my email in the chat right now. That is how you can reach me. Any other questions? All right, well, I thank everybody very much for participating this evening. Registration is open for the the continuing webinar series, Thursday night, 7 p.m. So look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.